Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I hope you're doing well and want to thank you for joining us for today's presentation. As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can type them into the question box at any time, and we will address them during the presentation. We'll also be distributing a PDF copy of the slides after the webinar has concluded. This webinar will be worth 1 CCS and CES credit, and we'll be sending the credit code in the chat box throughout the webinar. I'm excited to welcome our speakers today, Mark and Ed of BlueX, and Michael as our speakers. We're so excited to have them with us today, so without further delay, I will turn it over to Mark.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Allison. I really appreciate this webinar and NCBFAA hosting this. I'm excited actually to connect with. I see already like 360 of you guys participants listening in. I promise you this will be time well worth spent as we highlight what BlueX is doing from a very innovative standpoint of how to reform basically your business and become this tool to help you deepen your relationships with your customers and specifically importers. So we call this easy financing for importers because our company's main focus is for companies with international shipments coming into the U.S. So I know I've talked to quite a few of you that are actually participants on the like in real life. Shout out to Marcella. Hello, thank you for joining us today. And quite a few of my other friends that I've talked to about this. But we are also unveiling some very exciting new things as far as what we can do for importers. So. The subtitle here is the deepening of customer relationships, and I'm super excited to delve into that. So let's move on to the next slide. I want to first introduce our speakers. I know Allison just mentioned us, but I'm the head of business development for BlueX. And I also have with me Edward Hood, who, is a key product expert with BlueX. So I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves. Ed?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've spent about 6 years in some form of transportation or logistics. We've been doing this finance for Gap for importers for the last 2 years. It's been successful. The conversations are great. Beyond that, I see a continued building gap between importers and purchasers. And that's what I'd just like to be able to bring everybody up to speed on and what's available for their customers.
That sounds great. And Ed, thanks for being here. And we're also so honored and, so happy to have Michael Goldsmith from Dodola. Dodola is one of our freight forwarder partners that we've worked very closely with. But Michael, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Goldsmith. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales at Dodola Global Logistics. I've been with Dodola now for a year. My career dates back to the turn of the millennium from the late 90s, so more than 25 years on the freight forwarding side. I've held capacities as regional head of Trans-Pacific for companies such as Kuehne Nagel, was the global head of trade lane for UTI, and have spent 99.99% of my career focused on the international trades, more specifically in the Trans-Pacific eastbound trades. Throughout my short tenure with Dodola, I'm very happy to be synergized, partnered with BlueX. It's been a very good synergy throughout my time here, and I look forward to growing alongside this great company and looking forward to the expansion. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And thanks, guys, for kind of jogging my memory on how I really should introduce myself, right? But real quick on my side, I worked many years in the logistics industry on the freight forwarding side, and recently was brought on to BlueX to, be the liaison for freight forwarders. So my time and my focus is for every one of you 379 participants right now on this call to get to know each one of you. So please reach out, and I'll take you guys out to lunch and you know, especially if you're in the local LA area, but I do travel around the country to make sure that we're having that strong partnership with our freight forwarders. So thank you so much. Moving on to the next slide. I wanted to open up a quick discussion and have Ed and Mike chime in with me on three macro questions. So I really like to start big, and let's start looking at the market as a whole and maybe see where we're at. And, you know, participants, feel free to chime in as well in your chat box. You can maybe bring up some points for discussion. We're happy to bring it up. But our first macro discussion question is, how is the market overall for freight forwarding? Michael, maybe you can take this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. So it's the freight forwarding market is, we learn something new every day. To say we've seen it all is the kiss of death in our industry, because if anything we've learned since the turn of this decade, entering into the pandemic, we have not seen it all, and anything could happen. From when I first entered into the industry, there were 20 plus worldwide carriers. Today, there are 3 major alliances, 9 primary carriers operating global waters. We've seen such a market contraction as I've never experienced it. I was 20 years in when the pandemic hit, just about 20 years in. And when the pandemic hit, the makeshift change we've seen in Trans-Pacific eastbound rates has just been astronomical. Carriers typically charging anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 on average to the West Coast, from the Asia Pacific Rim to the West Coast, LA Long Beach specifically, moving upwards 10 times that rate level to north of $12,000, $13,000, even $15,000 for a single container. The pain felt by importers, it wasn't predicted. No one saw it coming. There was no foreshadowing to ever envision something like that. And the pain we saw on our importers' face when that happened, it was a wake-up call. So much change has become
Absolutely, especially and now we have some world events like the Red Sea issues. I mean, gosh, so much going on, right? That's affecting bottom line for our freight forwarders. Which, you know, I've had many conversations with individual freight forwarders, and down to getting squeezed on trucking. I mean, there's so much going on where I think freight forwarders need that competitive advantage, and I think BlueX with what we're offering may be able to give you at least that little push, that little oomph to win the business with the customers. Ed, any thoughts? You going around and talking to a lot of importers, but also some freight forwarders?
On the freight forwarder side, all the ones that I work with repeat almost exactly what Michael said. I work pretty closely with a handful, and they continually just don't know what the next rock is to follow. That's sometimes the way they feel. Other times it's we have customers that are getting pinched by interest rates and trying to figure that out. It wasn't just a run up in the actual cost, it was also a run up in rates. That was the cost to borrow was astronomically rising too.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the second question. How's the market for your customers? And let's hear from Michael, especially on the freight forwarder logistics side. What's the market looking like for those you sell to?
So right now, a lot of what Ed's just mentioned about the geopolitical issues that are affecting contract pricing at this stage, it's, again, used the term ubiquitous. Everyone knows what's happening in the Red Sea. Everyone sees the challenges through the Suez Canal, the issues with dredging through the Panama Canal, the challenging time that this happens right at the fall of Chinese New Year, carriers cutting capacity. The other thing I will say, and I speak primarily from the customer's vantage point. As a forwarder, I can make a statement specifically from the forwarder's view, but I'm always on the side of our clients. I'm always thinking what is potentially an issue for them. I empathize with their situation and try to see it through their lens. So from the customer side, it's just a lack of predictability is the best way to put it. Throughout, I would say, the first 20 years of my career, there has been a bit more predictability as we've seen. Of course, we've had ebbs and flows throughout the year, certainly seen in 2008 through 2010, the makeshift change we felt during the recession period, but no pain greater felt than what we've seen within the past 4 years alone. And what we're seeing today is very similar to what we saw during the pandemic, but there is a stark difference between what we experienced during the pandemic. During the pandemic, it was a difference between supply and demand in the marketplace. Obviously, the demand far outpacing supply, which caused the rates to rise to the ridiculous level that they did, proving a market contraction unfathomable. Today, it's a bit different. Amongst all the geopolitical issues that we have mentioned, there's a lot of irony in the market that demand is still down. When we look at the overall order books from most importers, the demand ratio is still down, but the carriers are responding to those geopolitical issues. The fact that it's now adding 20 plus days in the Asia to Europe trades, as well as in the Trans-Pacific trades, we're seeing transit times increase. We're seeing limited capacity across the board. The carriers are responding to that by the rising costs. We've seen about 3 times GRIs holding in place, and rate levels going beyond $5,000 once again to the West Coast, beyond $6,000 to the East Coast. Again, I'm speaking specifically to the Trans-Pacific eastbound trades. There's a lot of uncertainty from most of the customers that I speak to. They all want that level of predictability brought back to them. They need some assurance in order for them to have sustainability, and solvency is on the ballot right now. Everyone wants to know how we're going to maintain. Everyone fears what they experienced in 21 and 22 that they
Absolutely, Michael. And, I'm seeing that with a lot of importers I'm talking to as well. Gosh, the fear of, hey, to get my products from overseas to America, what was a certain cost last year is now double right now, which really cuts into bottom line. Obviously, we're all experiencing the inflation, but ouch to the end customers. So whatever we can do, right, as freight forwarders, as, logistics partners to our customers, let's do our best to be able to do that. So let's move on to that third question. How can you enhance the customer relationships by working with BlueX? Real quick, because we're going to get to the slides and maybe rehash some of these points, but I'd love to get to some other discussions. But real quick, Ed and then Michael on this third question.
BlueX works with forwarders, brokers, and BCOs. And one of the best ways I've been able to see that we benefit the customer relationships is we're actually taking away some of those hard conversations. If somebody's late, or you need to, instead of having to call somebody and say, hey, listen, I got to hold whatever shipment, I can't fund it for you until this. We're in the middle. The forwarder, the broker comes to us and says, hey, do they have a BlueX account? And then we go, yes. And they go, well, here's their invoice, here's their bill. I reach out to the customer says, yeah, pay it. And it's done immediately. The broker or the forwarder knows they're getting paid. They get their release done, and they don't have to have those conversations that could possibly sour or damage a relationship.
Absolutely. And Michael, in your experience, you've been basically a partner with BlueX and have adopted our platform. What are your thoughts on how it's enhanced those customer relationships for you?
Well, I used the word earlier, and I want to use that same word again. What I've experienced through the vantage point through my customers is solvency. The ability for them to be able to manage their capital outlay, to ensure some level of management of funds, to ensure that they're able to hold on to those funds longer, that they don't have to release them to the wild, and then able to get paid on time, really. And that's really the key, is everyone wants to make sure they maintain their business, pay their employees, pay their vendors on time, and as well as receiving payments from their customers, their stakeholders on time. So my experience has been with working with BlueX is that level of promise that BlueX is able to bring to our sales process and helping our customers envision their ideal solvency.
Michael, I love that. Releasing your funds to the wild for what, about 2 months?
Longer.
And Yes, and sometimes longer, and not be able to take on new business because your cash is strapped through, because you're trying to buy your inventory or bring it over. So that's huge. Thank you for that. Let's move on to the next slide, Ed. Yeah, so over here, we have a slide with kind of some, facts here. I'm just going to quickly gloss through this, but I think a lot of our audience, especially in a CE type situation, I really want to kind of stress these points as we look at the macro. But most importantly, the underlying gist of this slide is most U.S. importers are small businesses who are underserved by banks. And this population of small businesses is terribly underserved. A lot of banks have very stringent underwriting parameters that many importers, especially newer ones, do not fit. So let's look at this. The finance gap for financing to support imports and exports has widened to like trillions of dollars in 2022. So that's huge. Also, over 42% of small business importers account for import sales into the US. So that's about half, guys. A lot of people think, oh, it's just the big box, big companies that are importing stuff from overseas. No, it's actually a lot of small importers. And, I've dealt with a lot of them and then seen the struggles. One of them is like, I had their business grow so much that they were shipping things into their small commercial office with a little bit of warehouse space, and now had to take over the other two units, office slash industrial unit, condo units, to meet the demand for their product. So how cool is that, right? But a lot of struggles along the way. 42%, wow. And then also over 40% of small business importers uh, face financing gaps. So you're looking at, especially like, now with the rising costs of shipping. And then over 75% of small businesses are worried about access to credit. So true. I can tell you on an anecdotal level, so many small businesses I talk to are worried that there's nothing to fall back except their own personal finances and maybe access to a little bit of money from family and friends, but the banks aren't going to help them, and they're just so excited to hear that there's a solution here. And finally, over 60% of companies are grappling with increased late payments in the current year. So I don't know if you guys, listening in, have experienced this, but I've been talking to quite a few freight forwarders that are finding that customers are asking for extended terms. Customers that normally were paying on time are not paying on time now because, obviously it's a combination of the rising costs, but also the economy. So we're here to address that problem. Moving on to the next slide. Ed? Just so you know, actually, I'm going to give this to Ed, okay? Because Ed actually told me, he said, don't say we're a new company. We're actually the industry's best kept secret. So, Ed, can you give us a little bit of history on BlueX and why we've been that best kept secret?
Yeah, for, BlueX as a funding company has only been around for about 2.5 years. I've been most of the time since we started. But BlueX as a company started as a trade company building the back ends for Evergreen. So think GreenX and other websites like that, where you can go in and book your own cargo or go in and grab that. That entire e-commerce portal, we actually run the entire back end of it. So we have a deep experience in that area and a huge background in software. That's what we've been able to build out. We didn't see a gap or a need in the marketplace till about 2.5 years ago, that there wasn't a good payment solution to be able to have flexible terms. The carriers were never going to give you terms. And then we found out that we had actually found something that was neat across the industry, and then we rolled it out to where it was available to everybody, not just on the websites.
Sounds good. And really, these are kind of the partners that, this slide, I like people to know that, what we've done in our operation, even as a young company, is actually very foundation's been very conservative. And when a lot of people ask, hey, is it a new company? I'm like, not really, it is, but the industry the chief executive team has been in the logistics industry for decades, and so honing on to that need of of credit and and terms and all of that really came out from and organically from understanding, hey, what does the market really need? And that's why BlueX exists. Let's move on to the next slide. And I'm going to hand this over to Ed, because Ed, you're our product expert, and I'd love for you to kind of, do the overview of the different entryways of into our platform.
Thanks. So BlueX, we strive to continue to adapt to the current marketplace for our customers. As you can see right here, you have a fund orders now or buy. That's our standard pay it later, where if a customer has an invoice they need to pay a supplier in Asia or internationally, we're going to be able to, with basic documentation, be able to fund that order for them when they need it. And then at the point of sale or at the point of distribution, they get to choose whether they need it for 30 or 60 extra days to fund that gap. So instead of them having to have $200,000 effectively floating on the water, we've been able to cover that, and they can, as Michael pointed out, deploy that capital somewhere else. Fund orders now is actually our area where we allow the customers to make the purchase order deposit. And what that is we'll make the deposit on their behalf so they don't have to. And then if the customer wants to be able to, we can actually pay it later when it's ready to go. So they're out zero money till it lands. So they've been able to effectively finance 100% of the entire product. And then that goes into other products that we've been able to build for customers based on a lot of requests. And we've been able to turn some of these products into directly where you can factor it. So then when it lands and becomes an AR, we're going to be able to give you up to 80% of that product or that invoice. That then allows you to be able to go out and spend it, and then we'll wait to collect on the entire invoice. This is actually incredibly effective for companies like small and medium-sized companies that get those really large orders from top 50 retailers, and then have extended or payment terms that they can't carry. But this allows them to be able to go out and win that business, take a little bit off their margin, but still be able to win that business to grow their company. Lastly, our digital wallet allows people to pay with local rails. We've been able to build a system that allows you to be able to send money instantly within the local, instead of using everything around a SWIFT and having those payment delays. Somebody's gonna be able to know the money's there because we're gonna send it directly from a bank in Hong Kong to their account in Hong Kong or other countries if needed.
It's kind of like payments without borders, right?
Correct. This is an average timeline of what we see with customers from the time somebody makes a purchase order to the time they get their repayment. This is what we call the supply chain gap. Usually you have to put the order 10, 20, 30, sometimes even 50%, depending on your terms of your vendors. So you're gonna have sometimes anywhere from $20,000 to $200,000 locked up. And then from there, you can use BlueX to fund the orders now, where we're gonna make those deposits on your behalf. And then you're not out that money, and we're only making the minimum deposits you need, what you request. And then when it's ready to ship, say 4 to 6 weeks later, we're going to use pay it later to be able to pay for the product. And then you can also use pay it later for your logistics and customs, so that you have less outlay and more flexibility. And if a customer so sees fit, they can also use, as I mentioned, the get paid faster, which allows you to effectively factor the product at a competitive rate to then have money to wait for the repayment. When the repayment comes in, we take our fees out of it, and depending on how much is left out of that, you're gonna be able to get it. If customers know that they run slimmer margins, they tell us and we adjust that way. They don't end up owing at the end. They don't have to pay anything out of pocket. All they do is receive their money. The benefits with BlueX for the importer is it's a second line of credit. But we don't usually run into any issues with current lines of credit because we're effectively a broker of the financing for freight and cargo. We're a vendor for freight and cargo only. We don't do anything else. You can't hand me a bill for rent or payroll and I'm going to be able to make that payment. We've effectively built the product out to where it doesn't clog up your balance sheets. You're not having to put collateral up and there's no impact to your credit score. I see a question came in. Somebody asked, I am a broker, a freight forwarder who owes me $50,000. Can I request the freight forwarder to go through BlueX and pay us? And how does it work? The easy answer is yes. You would refer your customer to us. I myself would talk to them. We'd go through the sign-up process if we could have them approved. There is an underwriting approval on that. When they gave us the appropriate documentation and said to pay you, we would send you the $50,000 and then we would take responsibilities to work with the customer for a repayment. I hope that answered your question. I'd like to hear Michael talk about the benefits that he's seen and then I can kind of go through them.
A lot of the benefits you had already mentioned, Ed. Again, I'm speaking primarily from the client's vantage point. I'm not speaking as a forwarder, I'm speaking as an importer. As an importer, I want to have control of that capital. As I mentioned earlier, there is a stark contrast between the way things were pre-pandemic and the way things are today. And anything that's guaranteed is change. And as I mentioned, the carriers will always respond to the geopolitical issues. Even with demand being low right now, rates are still high. There is this massive market contraction. It's a constantly moving EKG. If we look at the Transpac trades, it's the way it's been for especially the past 4 years. So if you're an importer, you've become used to that. And that's the dialogue that freight forwarding salespeople tend to have over and over again with those consignees, those US-based consignees, those importers. So they're used to hearing it, but they're also seeing the astronomical rise in cost in general, cost of goods. So the outlay that they have to put up front, that capital investment that they have to release, we mentioned earlier, release to the wild, there's immediate pain behind that. So if a customer can find themselves holding on to that capital, I've seen it's the light bulb, the magic light bulb that goes off above their heads. They're like, wow, you can do things like extend terms. You can do things like help us manage our supply chain at origin. So we don't have to wait, because you got to keep in mind too, figure if the average, say the purchase order takes 90 days to cycle from the day that the PO was placed, from the day that it's received into the US. From that moment on, they're still working on those terms that they negotiated with their stakeholders. Now, let's say in an environment where their stakeholder happens to be the big box retailer, we all know them, the Costco's of the world, the Walmarts of the world, those that are having their terms being set as net 90 and beyond, that means they could potentially be holding out the first 90 days in the production cycle, plus another 90 days until they see $1 of that money. So that capital investment is gone. Saying to the customer, hey, you know what? This is a different way to look at it, is allowing them to think outside the box, less transactional. Another thing too that they've got to keep in mind is that with all this mass change in the market and all these pain points they experience, their customers expect delivery on time. So we see a lot of times as people tend to, or importers tend to just look at every line item in the P&L, see, okay, how can we cut here, cut here, cut there? What the bigger picture is what if we could look at that total capital outlay and help you manage that better? Isn't that a better option than $100 a container? The conversation switches from transactional to more value-add, thought-provoking dialogue. So in my personal experience, it's been a plus because it helps you, and I used this word earlier, I use it again, synergize with that customer to allow yourselves to become part of their ecosystem. You're a solution versus just another vendor that has a rate on a page.
Thanks. So just kind of go over, Michael pointed out that we increase the customer relationships by giving your customer more flexibility, to having conversations about what the forwarder or the broker can do for you to better your current situation with them without having to continually talk about money, because the money conversation happens with BlueX. Like the person who asked if they could clear a $50,000 invoice, they also asked for a clarification question on that. His question was, does both parties, the payer and the payee, have an account with BlueX? That answer is yes. How that works for the forwarder or the broker is it takes about 5-10 minutes. We're just verifying where the money's going. So they have their account they can receive funds on, and it doesn't get received inside the platform. It gets sent directly to your checking accounts that you've signed up. And the payer has agreements with BlueX that say you're going to pay. We're paying this on your behalf, and you're going to pay back based on terms that you select. It's free for anybody to sign up. The only time that they pay for it is when they use the product or they borrow the capital. To receive funds on it's free always. There's no questions on that. The extra benefits to be able for your customers, like Michael's brought up a couple times, better capital, better working cash flow, and the ability to clear invoices. If somebody has up to 90 days back, we're going to be able to work with that. I don't take anything beyond 90 though, to answer the last couple questions that have come in. Mark, this is yours.
Yeah, let me kind of remind everyone, and I just want to kind of highlight some of what's been talked about and reinforce one point. I think a lot of freight forwarders, custom brokers, people that work directly with importers have to have uncomfortable financial conversations, right? Bringing us in and offloading that, I think, is worth its weight in gold. And that's really the heart of this referral program. The referral program is something we're actually tweaking to become better serving to our freight forwarders and custom broker partners. So please contact me after, because there's a few things we're starting to roll out that I actually want to just focus on a few freight forwarders and custom brokers that I have good relationships with, and offer certain guarantees when it comes to paying the invoice. And I think that's going to be very attractive. But on top of that, we are so happy to extend and add as a value add for the partnership with our freight forwarders, especially that that we will extend terms for free. At the same time, whatever business is that BlueX gets, you will earn a commission on it as well. So really, it's this little chart here. Sign up for free, like Ed said. There is no cost. Some platforms out there will require a monthly subscription. We don't do that. We're transaction based. When you refer the customer and they sign up, your referral submits a cargo pay it later, which is the cargo financing portion, and your referral will settle the bill with BlueX. You being linked to that customer profile will then get paid your commission. So here's a kind of I call it the kitchen napkin or table napkin math here. If your referred customer submits a cargo pay it later of 500K with a net 60-day term, that comes up to about 5% handling fee. Your commission will be as follows: 1,200. So imagine if you're doing 100 of these, you're looking at about 125K of extra revenue for your company. So that's the long and short of that. Let's continue.
That's the end of the slides. I'd love to have a couple more questions. I know some of the more common questions I get asked from BCOs or importers is, how does this change what I do? Well, a lot of times we see customers that are dealing with trying to grow their business or just trying to maintain their current growth projections. And we've been able to go in there and help them cover their gaps so they can free up to either expand headcounts or expand product lines. We have a couple customers that have pointed out to us of what they've been able to grow. One example is we work with one importer that sells into large retailers. They had a problem with their space. They were getting pushed to have just-in-time delivery or near just-in-time delivery from their customers, and they were still bringing in large amounts. By utilizing BlueX Capital, they went out and actually expanded their warehouses by 2x. That allowed them to grow, to be able to have the products to be able to sell to those customers in the times that they're being demanded. So they use BlueX to actually offset the demands of their retailers in a way that we hadn't quite thought of. We didn't pay for the warehousing, but they used the savings of the capital allocation to be able to make those. Another one is we had a customer who came to us with a $15 million purchase order over 12 months. He barely could afford his current growth projections, let alone an extra 15 million that he's gonna have to pay the deposits in for the factory. He worked with us. We took a look at the company that he was working with, and he signed up for our entire what we call door-to-door service, where we did the deposit, we paid it later, and then we factored it. And that's worked out perfect for the person. He scored a $15 million line of business for free giveaways for casino ware. And he's been able to go out and not have to have any concerns over what's going to pay for that and how am I going to meet my contractual obligations. Mark?
Michael, do you have any other insights, especially on how it's, not only for yourself as a freight forwarder, but also some of your customers?
Well, that's a loaded question, and the part that I fear the most is I can go on a hour-long dissertation on how this market has impacted all industries, and I've seen it. I've seen it across fast-moving consumer goods, furniture, footwear, garments, you name it. All the trade symposiums that I've been part of, they all feel the pain in some way, some fashion or another. The issue for them is make sure they maintain their supply chain for on-time deliveries, making sure they have enough inventory on hand to satisfy their stakeholders. And again, I feel I don't want to be a broken record, but it's just managing that capital outlay is what I'm experiencing from what we're discussing here now. I find myself in most cases being a logistician coming in and being giving an oratory on the Transpac trades over and over again, almost to the point where you could put a string on the back of my neck and just pull that string and I just take off. But I'm going to save everybody having to listen to that now and just cut right to the chase and say the experience that I've seen from the clients that I've talked to about this, it's night and day. It really is. So you're giving them breathing room. I mean, if we look at our own financial situations, each of us individually, if you came to us and said, hey, listen, I'll help you with your capital, your working capital every single day. I don't know what many people say, you know what, I don't need that. I'm good, unless you're, secretly a millionaire. But most people aren't. But in the case is like, hey, this is a great way to escape from a bigger problem. And from my experience, it just changes the direction of the dialogue with the customer.
Absolutely. And I want to commend Michael. I mean, Michael kind of told us when we did our dry run that we're kind of like his secret weapon. And he's like, is this right to like share it with other freight forwarders and custom brokers? Because, this has allowed you to win a lot of business, right? Because you're able to offer those extended terms. How's that worked out for you, Michael?
Well, I've managed sales teams for a long time, and I say it over and over to the sales team that reports to me now. I remind them that you're the voice of reason when you speak to your customers. You've got to take on that leadership role and help them through the journey in such a way you're solving problems. Anybody can walk in the door with a rate. Anybody can do that. That's not what it takes to sell in this business. What it takes to sell in this business is having the knowledge and the behavioral aspects that's needed behind the scenes to go into a client and say to that client, hey, I can see your pain. I experienced this from other people within your vertical market. This is how I solved their problems. And this is what one of the tools that we'll use day after day when speaking to clients. Is like, hey, let's look at the bigger picture. Longevity. That's what customers are interested in. That's what importers are want. They want it. So when you're speaking that, you're speaking their language, because again, the transactional dialogue is just dead. No one wins on rate, but ideas, people win on that every day. Bring in a new concept forward, people win on that every day. And having the desire to help change an importer's world, this is the way to do it. This is one of the ways. And again, my experience has just been, it's in our toolbox and we enjoy it. And I can't quite think of the words I want to use now, but it's been quite euphoric. I guess I'll say that.
We got four questions that have come in. One is, do we see any emerging trends or changes in the freight and cargo industry that will impact the need for gap financing? And right off the bat, I can definitely think on the cargo side, there's continually been a gap or pressures from the large retailers to continually extend terms. In the past, most people are used to net 30, net 45, and then everybody pushed it to 60. Depending on the amount of volume somebody's pushing in to the retailers, I'm hearing 105. So if somebody's having to bring product in and then deliver, and then the clock on 105 days starts, people could actually be out 6 months before they get paid from these vendors. Everybody is negotiating different terms, but I'm seeing quite a few of my customers coming back and say, I'm getting pushed for 105 days. And if I want it earlier, it's going to cost me 2% for every 30 days before. So effectively, the retailer is saying, we'll factor it for you at 2%, at 24%. And it's 24% for every 2 months. So it doesn't really matter what they want, but those are the pressures I'm seeing in the marketplace. I'm also seeing on the forwarder side, Michael might be able to speak to this, that nobody knows where rates are going, so nobody wants to guarantee terms past 5-15 days. Because if I say we're going to give you 30 days all the time, and then rates double overnight, over a period of a week, depending on what geopolitical changes happen, you may have some interesting conversations there with your CFO, especially for some people that have really large customers that have high volume amounts. That was a great question.
I want to add another point too. Yeah. Again, this could be a dialogue that could be taken offline, but I'm going to try to practice my brevity and cut right to the chase. Importers have to take that into consideration. They also have to take the supply chain part of it into heavy consideration. One of the conversations that is not happening now, but let's talk about the East Coast for a moment. Importers on the East Coast, they felt that those that have a supply chain throughout the lower 48s that import both to the West and to the East Coast, had to shift a lot of their, especially big box retailers, shift a lot of their volume away from the West Coast because of the parking lot of vessels that we had in LA Long Beach throughout 21. So that pain point has caused them to rethink their domestic warehousing or 3PL process and how they're going to bring goods in, what that thoroughfare looks like. So a lot of those goods have transitioned to the East Coast. What we're hearing now are a lot of the importers on the East Coast are aware of the upcoming ILA USMX contract that's due to take place. The contract is up on September 30th of this year. So there's already talks about that being somewhat contentious. Now, without getting too into detail about that, I've been asked by a lot of importers about what the future, what could potentially happen down the line, what Q2, Q3 is going to look like. So outside of what we see, which is ubiquitous in the market today, the Red Sea, the Panama Canal, all those major factors that are importing the market today, there's also future issues that they have to consider. So for those East Coast importers, they're also saying, okay, well, if we've now got to move these goods to the West Coast, that takes time. So they have to build that into their supply chain analysis. They got to build that into their planning. And the ultimate answer, people say, okay, what's the contingency plan behind that? And the reality is time is the ultimate contingency plan. Ordering ahead, having enough inventory on hand. They certainly felt that during the pandemic, lack of inventory. Now is the time where they're saying, okay, how are we going to adjust to potentially avoid these pitfalls? right? What is our ideal outcome in that environment? So if they're making those types of changes and they're building that in, that time in, now they're further down the cycle. So now you're not talking, let's say you use that 90-day purchase order process, and the 90 days to get paid by the retailer or the major stakeholder has net 90 plus. Now you're going beyond 6 months to get that capital. So where does it all end? So there are a lot of factors. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what I'm talking about now. This is one of the major issues in the market that I'm being asked daily about, what kind of contingency plans in place. So the idea behind this all is thinking ahead, planning ahead, building in enough time is the key, but doing it with managing your working capital is also paramount.
So
I want to address.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, some other questions here. Yeah, I think Ed, we're just reading each other's minds, but let's address the one that says, does BlueX only work with U.S. registered companies or worldwide? Ed, you want to take that one?
So BlueX only works with U.S. Right now only works with U.S. registered companies. That doesn't exceptionally accept in certain situations the product has to touch the United States for us to be able to fund on it. Now it could come from China, be held in touch the United States and then move on to another country. I'm going to be able to do that. If somebody wants to buy products and they're a US based company and they want to buy products from a multitude of other companies, which were countries, we're going to be able to do that. But as of right now, and what I'm seeing for at least for the next 3 quarters, is it's got to be a US based company. I have quite a few customers asking me, can we do orders that are destined for Europe or other countries? But right now, no, we're not set up for it.
I get that question all the time. There's a few other ones.
Yep.
Let's address it. Is
Major
it
shipping
commission for the
lines.
first operation or for all of the referrals operation? The answer is all. So
All.
if they regularly transact, you'll be getting a commission on each of their containers coming in.
Yep.
And then
Only
also one more clarification. It says here, does both parties, i.e. payer and payee, do they have to have an account with BlueX to receive payment? Ed, yes, I believe, but you might want to add
I
some
answered
color to
that
that.
one.
Mm-hmm.
The extra color is both sides need to have an account just so we can verify where the money goes. Everybody's alert to fraud these days, and the most concern of us is just making sure the money ends up where it needs to go at the time it needs to be there. And by having both parties on the platform, the payer, of course, is going to be able to have the most documentation. The payee, it takes 5 to 10 minutes, and it's just basic information. Basically, we're asking, are you a real company in the country or wherever you're located at? And I need to verify the bank accounts for the micro deposit, because I want to make sure that I'm sending the money to the right account.
And it's pretty simple. I think the user interface on BlueX, especially having been the back end of Evergreen, and has gone through so much testing of user functionality and ease of operation. So I recommend everyone, contact me, contact Ed, and let's get you signed up. I mean, I'm super excited about that. The last question here, I don't see any more coming in. But let's address this one. Are all the major shipping lines registered with your company? This will be for freight payment. Ed.
So I don't know everyone that you're possibly talking about. Many are. It takes us about 3 to 4 days to onboard a new payer or a new payee. And from there, we're going to be able to onboard effectively any company that wants to get paid. The larger the company, sometimes there's more layers to get them to agree. In my time here in 2 years, I've seen a total of 3 companies that were both all small, just refused to sign up. It's never really been an issue. We're very familiar from our time with BlueX Trade with the major carriers. So being able to bring them on board is not much of an issue.
Sounds great. Okay, I think that's it for all the questions. I think you guys see the message on how to get your CE. I wish there was a slide that gave our contact information, but I'll just mention it right now. My email, please, freight forwarders, custom brokers, contact me. I want to get to know you guys, and let's use this as a tool to deepen your customer relationships. I'm so excited about that. My email is mark.ang@bluextrade.com. That's marc.ang, Apple, Nancy, Grace, at bluextrade.com. And Ed and Michael, you want to give your closing remarks and also your contact info.
Michael,
Let's start with
floor is yours
Ed.
first.
Yeah.
Okay, well, again, I want to thank everybody for their participation today. My email address, if anybody wishes to email me anything related to the Trans-Pacific trades, is Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, at Dodola. That's D as in David, E, D as in David, OLA.com. So again, DEDOLA.com. Or you can reach me on my mobile 661-310-4015. We're open to having discussions with any brokers, have any questions, any clients having issues on the Transpac trades. We're here to support your needs.
Sounds good.
I'm with BlueX. My email address is edward.hood@bluextrade.com. That's EDWARD.HOOD@bluex.com. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate all 400 roughly that came in today, and everybody else that may watch this on demand.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you to NCBFAA. Thank you to Allison, Amy, and everyone else of the team that made this happen. So I really appreciate it. And every one of you who spent your hour today with us, thank you for your time. And, please reach out to us. Real quick, also my cell phone, please feel free to text me or WhatsApp me, whatever it is, 818-577-5576. That's 818-577-5576. And also, just so you know, geographically, Michael and I are both in Southern California, and Ed, you're up in the San Francisco Bay Area, right? So
that is correct.
Anyone that is local, feel free to contact us. We'd love to get to know you and take you out to lunch. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
And that concludes today's webinar. I want to thank Mark, Ed, and Michael for your time and efforts putting together today's presentation. I want to thank the audience for your participation. And as a reminder, the CCS and CES credit code has been sent in the chat. So there'll be instructions on how to apply your credit in the chat box.